Synchronize right now. I'll leave 2 here. We'll put recorder 3 in the highway. Put this ball right here. Recorder right there. First of all, I think a little explanation as to why I'm doing all this is in order before I go any further. Beginning about 6 weeks ago, around the 6th of July, and continuing for several weeks, I began to get some intriguing audio from a location in northwest Wisconsin I call Ghost Road. This is not the actual road I'm showing here from Google Earth. The name is also different as per the landowner's request. I'm just showing an area that looks similar to the actual spot for the sake of narrative fidelity. I had 2 different locations on Ghost Road where I placed my recorders regularly. One was about 2 miles in and away from the highway. We'll call that one South Ghost for the purpose of this video. The other, also on Ghost Road, was closer, at about a 1/4 mile away from the highway. We'll call that one North Ghost. On both recorders, I recorded these rumbling sounds on many different occasions within that time frame. This is the one that really got my attention. I've had my audio recorders for some years now, but until I heard this, I never realized that they recorded in stereo. You won't be able to tell unless you're wearing either headphones or buds, but if you are, you'll hear 2 separate signals here traveling from right to left. Very strange indeed. But these did not resemble what I call rumble strikes, as is produced when a vehicle passes over rumble strips on the highway, as much as some of these other questionable sounds. So then I decided to do a little experiment. I synced up 2 recorders, putting one on the highway and one in the woods at North Ghost. I chose North Ghost because I wanted to establish a definitive baseline for what rumble strikes from my Jeep sounded like a couple thousand feet into the woods. The South Ghost location was not used during the experiment. It was just too far away to pick up the rumble strikes from my Jeep, and I wanted to match up the timestamps on both recorders as reliably as possible when my rumble strike was heard. I also wanted to establish a good baseline for the difference in sound intensity from this event in the 2 locations, taking care to match up the timestamps on both files, of course, to confirm that each recorder was recording the same rumble strike. I also gave a honk, as you can hear, before the strike for further confirmation. In other words, it was important to be sure that the 2 recorders were recording the same signal at any given time, and that this would be easily confirmed by checking the timestamp as displayed in my signal processing program. This baseline was absolutely necessary in establishing confidence when matching corresponding signals from recorder 2 to recorder 3 in the experiment going forward. Recorder 2 would always be placed in the woods on the stump, and recorder 3 would always be placed along the ditch at the junction of Ghost Road and the highway, always hidden in this birch bark tube. These variables were kept consistent for each subsequent night of the experiment, exactly the same spots, using the exact same recording settings. Both recorders were identical, Olympus WS852s, purchased together 2 years earlier. I will play back a few other rumble strikes from actual vehicles from the night when I captured the significant anomalies. These sounds will be used as controls in this experiment to establish the similarities in time and the differences in intensity from recorder 2 to recorder 3. The settings, both on the recorders and upon editing, were equal and unchanged. The volume playback that you will hear is not actual volume as heard on site. It might be close, but there's no guarantee. It's better to focus on how the rumble strikes from actual vehicles heard from recorder 3, which was by the highway, are much, much louder than the corresponding strikes heard from recorder 2. I'm not going to get into the statistical analysis of the decibel differences from the anomaly to the control, as well as the baseline comparisons. You will be able to tell without a doubt with your naked ear how much louder a rumble strike is as heard from the highway as opposed to a quarter mile into the woods. And that this difference varies very little from signal to signal, so that when you hear a rumble strike from recorder 2, you're going to expect the corresponding signal from recorder 3 to be much louder, in a consistent pattern without much variability. Without leading the witness any further here, let me just play the results, and you be the judge. Okay, that one was pretty straightforward and easy to present. This next one happened at 10:41 of that same evening and is a little more difficult because it occurs right after a verified rumble strike, as if to echo it. From the woods, this second rumble is actually louder than the first, proving it was not an echo. Here we have roughly 3/4 of a second between the first strike and the slight secondary strike heard here. A full 1 1/4 seconds less than the difference between the first strike and the anomaly. proving that this second louder rumble heard from recorder 2 was not produced from the highway. This is our second anomaly from this evening. The similarities in sounds from actual strikes to the anomalies shown here are hard to overlook. We've all heard of other researchers' claims, which are actually just suspicions, of some unknown which can mimic the calls of other known animals which inhabit the same woods. Some suspect these unknowns can mimic the sounds of coyotes, owls, horses, crows, etc., etc. But what about man-made sounds? Would that be so hard to believe? The reason why rumble strikes were so vital to isolate for this experiment, as opposed to, say, owls or coyotes, is because it nails down one very important variable: location. Rumble strips tend not to move very far from the highway. I don't doubt the possibility of these mimic savants imitating other living animals in the woods. There was just no way to test for that. Not unless you consider the ridiculous hypothetical of ridding the entire earth of barred owls except for one. And that one last barred owl would be locked in a cage in a specific location. You would then sync up 2 audio recorders as I did, place one near the owl's cage and one just far enough into the woods where you could still hear the caged owl's calls as a control variable. Then if you did hear an owl on the recorder from the woods, but did not from the cage on the first recorder, you could then say that there was something else mimicking the sound of our owl in the woods, based on the variable of location. Location was a key variable here, and that's why rumble strips were the perfect choice. This is why, speculating as to whether or not these purported mimic savants imitate the sounds of other living animals, which can move around at will, is forever going to be a mystery. Unless someone gets lucky enough to capture clear video of one of these things performing such a mimicry, frustration will be the default attitude going forward. I tried to find similar research where multiple recorders were synced up with the intent to determine the location of a signal. Not finding anything as of the time of this video release, I'm simply going to refer to the sampling method as multiphasic pinpointing for now. Please refer to the description below for the actual term for the sampling method. I'm assuming I'm not the first. Now that I've had time to think about it, I consider myself really lucky to have this particular observation fall into my lap. Frustrated, as other researchers can attest to, as to how many times I have suspected mimicry, but could do nothing about. That is until now. Growing up in northern Wisconsin, I'm no stranger to black bears. They are the only type of bear in Wisconsin, and I've never heard anyone lay claim to the contrary. I can honestly say that I do not believe this sound to be of a black bear, especially one that can mimic rumble strikes so well. Is this mimicking behavior something that black bears actually do? I don't know. To be fair to the skeptics here before they comment, I have to make it abundantly clear that my position regarding the results of this experiment is that the anomalies recorded in the woods were not produced from the highway, and were produced by something in the woods. Notice how I carefully chose the word something? This was not by accident. Ideally, this experiment would have only one phase, starting with my alternative hypothesis that not all the rumbling sounds heard in the woods would be caused by rumble strikes from the highway. That way, I could just dust off my hands, drop the mic, raise my arm in the air, and do a Breakfast Club walk-off. But there's just no way to get away from talking about the cause of this sound. Not with this subject. It's a very hot-button issue in the Bigfoot community. People are getting fed up with non-answers and unsubstantiated super theories that seem to have no limits. These super theorists, emboldened by a complete lack of peer review, have made my second hypothesis all the more impossible to lay out in a constructive way. Nevertheless, much to the chagrin of many who want all the answers right now, I will be claiming the null hypothesis here in regards to what caused these rumbling sounds. It was my intention to isolate the significance of the location of the unknown sound rather than the cause. If you want to say it's a bear, I'd like to hear a comparison that you have to back up your claim. Please provide a link so we can all listen. By claiming the rumbling sounds or anything in particular, you have taken the path of the alternative hypothesis, and therefore the onus would now be on you to provide the evidence to back up your claim. No anecdotals, please. To tell the truth, I hope someone comes up with a magic link that can explain what is heard here with certainty. I really do. It will add to my tool shed of known things, sharpening my perception through a better process of elimination. If you like my videos, please consider subscribing. Click on the bell to get notifications when I post a new video.